Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to the vlog. You can see what's behind me. We're back up in Jacksonville, going to play on the Best Bet live stream. I am looking to go in there and try to make something happen. And I won't lie, I don't really recognize anybody from the list outside of Aaron B. So I don't really know what this table holds, but why don't we go over there and find out. If you enjoy it, like and subscribe. Let's get to it. Despite the drive feeling like it took 10 years, I actually got there about an hour early. So I took a little bit of time to get some B-roll, and then I sat down to have a meal. The food at Best Bet is pretty good. I went with the yakitori chicken served over white rice, and the chicken was really good quality. Veggies were good too. I also enjoyed the sauce, so it's a great way to start the night. I don't recognize a ton of players from the list outside of Aaron B. The guy to my direct left goes by the name The Maniac. Apparently he has a poker vlog on YouTube. Just search The Maniac Poker Vlog to find his channel, and he and I are going to do battle a couple times tonight. It's always good to be back on the live stream, and in typical Best Bet fashion, it won't take very long for me to get involved. The second hand of the night, we see an under the gun straddle. We then see a call from +1, and it folds to the hijack, who also calls. It folds over to me in the small blind, and I look down at pocket jacks. I bump it up to $25. Only +1 calls, so we're heads up out of position. The flop is ace-3-4 rainbow. Of course, I don't love seeing that ace there. I check, and my opponent bets $50. While I don't love the ace, I can't fold to just one single bet, so I call. We're off to the turn. The turn is a bink jack of hearts, so now we have middle set. I check, looking for +1 to continue, but unfortunately she checks behind. The river is a 4 of diamonds, so now we've boated up. I know I have the best hand, so I'm trying to figure out a size here. She's got about $125 left, and so I'm not sure if I should bet really big or really small. So I go about halfway, 60 bucks. I have a habit of getting involved in huge hands in the first orbit at Best Bet. Could this be another one? Unfortunately not, because she folds, but we do get to drag some chips early.
Tried one bluff on the flop.
Just a couple minutes later, we're in +2 and it folds to me, and I look down at 10-jack offsuit. I bump it up to $12. Folds all the way to Kella on the button, who then 3-bets to $30. It folds back to me, and I call, looking to smash a flop. We're heads up. The flop is queen-jack-6 with 2 diamonds, so we have middle pair and a backdoor straight draw. I don't know if you'd call that crushing a flop. I start with a check, and Kella wastes no time jamming for her last $58. I don't love the spot, but it's early, she's short stacked, and I think it's a good price to gather some information and confirm some suspicion, so I make the call. The turn is a 6 of diamonds, both bringing in diamonds and pairing the board. The river is a blank, and we see that we were up against kings, which I had a feeling she could have had, so while we lose the hand, we gain a little bit of info. We're straddling from the button this time, and we see 5 limps before the action gets to me. I look down at 6-7 offsuit, and I feel it's a good enough hand to raise in position, so I make it $30. The Maniac snap calls me. This is going to kind of be his thing today. His actions are going to be very quick. Everyone else folds, so I'm heads up with this guy. The flop is ace-queen-deuce with 2 clubs, so it's not a great flop for me, but it's a good flop for my range. The Maniac checks, and I put a bet together of $65, and he folds before I can even get the bet out, but we win. In the next hand, it folds to the hijack, who limps. It's on me in the cutoff, and I look down at 10-9 offsuit. I'm going to put in a raise, and apparently the Maniac has psychic powers because he calls my $15 raise before I even get it out there. On to Aaron B in the small blind, and he has other ideas. He 3-bets to $45. It folds back to me, and I'll be in position of Aaron, so I call, and once again we see another snap from the Maniac, so we're off to a flop 3 ways in position. The flop is 10-4-6 rainbow, so we flop top pair. The action starts with Aaron, who puts out a C-bet for $25. With it being a rainbow board, I'm happy to just call and try to make my play on the turn. As I call, the Maniac snap raises to $100. The action's over to Aaron, and after some thought, he ends up calling, so it's back on me. It's $75 more to win $350, so I'm getting better than 4-1. The Maniac has been very wild early in this game. He'll shove with air, he'll lay made hands down, and as far as I can tell, he's snap shoved all in, so I really only have to worry about what Aaron is going to do on future streets. In the end, I decide the price is just too good, and I call, so we're off to the turn 3 ways with 1 all in. The turn is a 5 of spades, so there are some straights that come in. Again, when the Maniac raised the flop, I thought it was a shove. I didn't actually see that he has over $200 behind. His hands were kind of blocking my view. So when Aaron checks, I think we're playing for a dry side pot, and I check. So imagine how surprised I am to see the Maniac check behind. Oops. The river is a 4 of diamonds. It pairs the board, but I don't think it changes too much. Aaron checks, and I can see out of the corner of my eye the Maniac grabbing some chips, and this has kind of been his thing tonight. He'll often grab chips as if he's going to bet, but sometimes he ends up checking. Sometimes he does bet. I decide I'll go ahead and do the betting for him, and I rip it for 260 total. He puts his chips back down, and he enters the tank. He keeps looking at me, and he's trying to get a read.
Still already good, like it is. You can see now.
And Maniac's trying to look over at Andy to try to get a read on him, but Andy doing a good job not giving him any tails.
Eventually, the Maniac makes the fold, and it's back on Aaron with ace high. Perhaps he can put me on a busted straight draw and make a hero call? I don't think so. Aaron's too smart for that. Eventually, he ends up folding, but we do get to win a $700 pot. We played a couple bomb pots during this session, so about an hour in, there's $80 in the middle, and we head to a flop. The flop is Queen 8 deuce rainbow. It checks to me in the cutoff, and I look down at 8-6 of hearts, so I flop middle pair. I put a bet of $20 out, and it folds back to the hijack who calls. Well, buying it almost worked. The turn is a 5 of spades. It doesn't help me, but I'm happy to see the action check through. The river is a deuce of clubs, so it pairs the board, but once again the action will check through. I announce an 8, and he says I'm good, so we win a small bomb pot. In the next hand, we see an open from under the gun to $10. Good to see seat 9 checking in with his best sweater from the Phil Huxtable collection. It folds over to me in +2, and I look down at King Queen offsuit. I think this is a good 3-betting hand, so I put in the 3-bet for $35. It folds all the way back around to under the gun who calls, so we're heads up to a flop. The flop is Queen 5-4 with 2 clubs, so we flop top pair. It checks to me, and I'm trying to figure out what to do here, and I decide to go ahead and go with a down bet, and I bet $40. My opponent calls, so we're off to the turn. The turn's an 8 of spades, so some weird straight draws get there, but I don't see those in a 3-bet pot. However, my opponent leads into me for $50. Besides those straight draws that came in, I feel I'm probably ahead of most of his holdings, so I decide to go ahead and make the call. We're off to the river. The river's a 9 of clubs, kind of a gross card as it completes the flush. My opponent checks, and I'm probably only getting called by better, so I just check behind. My opponent flips over pocket 8s for the turn set, so thank God that didn't cost me more. In episode 71, I highlighted a hand where I made a perfect read on my opponent, and here's another example of making one of those reads. We see calls from under the gun and +1 before Marty and +2 bumps it up to $20. It folds to me on the button, and I have 10-9 of hearts. I love suited connectors, and since I'm in position, I'm not going to raise, I'm just going to call. We see the Maniac and the small blind call as well, as does +1, so we're 4 ways to a flop in position. The flop is Jack 10-3 with 2 clubs, so we flop middle pair. It checks all the way to me, and having a piece, I'm not going to give any free cards, so I bet $60. Before I can even get the chips across the line, the Maniac jams for $240 total. It's back on me, and the Maniac starts chirping. He tells me he swears to God that he has a pair. He says he wishes he could show one of his cards to me. He also says that he has an ace kicker. Now, with all that information, I think I can rule out ace-10 and ace-jack based on the pre-flop action. He could very well have jack-3 or maybe clubs, but it really feels like his hand could be ace-3. It is not the greatest price for me to call, but I don't mind giving this guy chips because he's not afraid to put him in the middle, so I make the call.
Draw or something like that.
He does call it.
Before the cards are even dealt, I can see him turning his hand over, and it is in fact ace-3 of clubs, so we're in pretty decent shape. We get a clean run out, we get the win here, and truth be told, had he just bet and sat there quietly, I probably lean more towards a fold. It was all his talking that got me to call.
Andy making the correct call and gets paid off for it.
We're straddling from the button when we see calls from the small blind, the big blind, and the cutoff. It's on me, and I look down at King 10 offsuit. I think this is a good spot to raise, and so I bump it up to $25. All 3 players call, so a very effective raise on my part. We're off to a flop 4 ways. The flop is 7-8 deuce with 2 clubs, so we have 2 overs and some backdoor draws. It checks to Aaron in the big blind, who leads for $20. We see a quick call from Jay in the cutoff. It's on me, and I think it's a great price, and I'm pretty sure the Maniac will come along if I call, so I do, as does the Maniac. We're still 4 ways to the turn. The turn's a 9 of clubs, so it completes the flush draw, but it actually gives us an open-ended straight draw as well as a flush draw of our own. The small blind decides to go ahead and bet out on this card, but he only bets for $25. It's like 1/7 a pot size bet. As Aaron's thinking, I'm expecting a call from him, thinking that will price the cutoff into call, and with all the extra equity I picked up, I can raise big and possibly take it down right then, or at least isolate. Aaron does call, and it's on Jay in the cutoff, who immediately announces a raise, and he makes it $200. It's back on me, and when Jay jams, I'm in the tank. He may have a higher club than me, like an ace or a king. He may have a set, which has us in really rough shape. I actually love my hand here, but with 2 people behind me, I'm just not sure I can make this call, and I really don't feel great anymore about jamming to isolate for all the things I just mentioned, so I actually end up making the fold. Everyone else folds, and Jay flips over 8-9 of hearts for 2 pair with no club, so a really good play by him because I never saw him flipping 2 red cards over. About 2 hours in, we had another bomb pot. Once again, $80 in the middle, and we see a flop. The flop is ace-deuce-4 with 2 diamonds. It checks to the big blind, who bets $20. It folds to +2, who makes the call. It folds all the way over to me on the button. I look down at queen-3 offsuit with the queen of diamonds, so I have a gut shot and a backdoor flush draw. It's $20 to win 140, so I'm getting like 7-1 odds, so I make the call. The small blind ends up folding, though, so we're 3 ways to the turn. The turn is a 10 of diamonds, so it does bring the front door flush in. It checks to me, and feeling that I've turned so much equity with the addition of a flush draw to go along with my straight draw, I put in a bet for $75. It folds back to +2, who elects to call. The cutoff folds, so we're heads up to the river. The river is a queen of hearts, and now I've rivered second pair. However, my opponent leads into me for $100. I actually hate the fact that I rivered equity here. I still beat any single diamond and any other misdraw out there. Eventually, curiosity gets the best of me and I make the call. My opponent turns over ace-5 of diamonds for the turn nut flush. Nice hand. Another wild one with the Maniac here. It folds to me in +1, and I look down at ace-jack offsuit. I open the action for $10. I'm immediately 3-bet by the Maniac to $35. It folds back to me, and I ask what he has behind, and it's about $200. I briefly consider a 4-bet, but instead I decide to go ahead and just call, and he's immediately asking me already if I have a pair. You can see him trying to get a read, but I'm resilient, like a statue. We're off to a flop. The flop is Jack-9 deuce with all clubs, so we flop top pair on a monotone board. I elect to check to see what my opponent does, and I'm surprised to see him check behind. The turn is a 6 of hearts. I don't see that changing very much. Perhaps I do have the best hand here, and so I put a bet for value out of $40, and I'm very quickly called, so we'll head off to the river. The river is the ace of clubs. It's a gross card because it gives me 2 pair, but it puts 4 clubs out there. I decide to go ahead and check, and my opponent insta-jams for about $115. Then he immediately flips over the 5 of spades. He's just talking up a storm, and the last time he did this, he was super weak.
Do you have a club?
No, I have no club.
What do you have?
2 pair.
Really?
Aces and jacks, yeah. Yep.
Snap cold. Should donate to the cause.
So the Maniac's showing the 5 of spades. He's showing the 5 of spades to Andy, who has 2 pair. Clubs, man. If you're getting clubs on this table, just play them.
I have pocket 5. Is that good? Depends if it's a club, right?
He mentions having pocket 5s, and there's a 33% chance that the other card is a 5 of clubs. For the same reasons as last time, I go ahead and I throw the call in. He shows pocket 5s with the 5 of clubs, and he's going to win this one. About 2.5 hours into the stream, we see an open from under the gun to $25, which is a pretty big opening size for this game. It folds to me in the hijack, and I look down at 2 black aces, so this is naturally a 3-bet spot. I bump it up to $75. It folds back to Marty, who has lost 2 pretty decent-sized hands in the last orbit, so I think he's a little steamed and he insta-calls, so we're heads up to a flop. The flop is King 4-3 with 2 hearts. There are safer flops, but this one's not terrible. Marty checks it over to me, and I've got to put a C-bet out there, so I put a 2/3 pot size bet out of $100, and I'm immediately jammed on for $250 effective. And, of course, I have aces, so I snap it off. We see we're up against Queen Jack of Hearts, so we're like a 60-40 favorite. We end up getting a clean run out and a full double up, and we're back up about $300.
Aces hold for Andy.
There's a straddle from under the gun. We then see an open from +1 to 11, a pretty small size. Maybe he didn't see the straddle. Aaron B in +2 makes the call. It folds over to Marty on the button, who also calls. It folds to me, and for $7 more, I'm happy to call with 7-8 offsuit and see a flop. The flop is 10-9-4 with 2 clubs, so we flop an open-ended straight draw. I start with a check, and I'm a little surprised to see it check all the way through. The turn is a bink jack of diamonds, so we've made the bottom end of the straight. I want to build a pot since my hand is made, and so I bet out for $25. The Maniac wastes no time min-clicking it to 50. Aaron B gets out of the way, and it's back on the button, who actually has 2 pair, and he decides to make the call. So, action back on me, and feeling my hand is best, it's still kind of vulnerable being the bottom end of the straight, and I feel like I can't just call here. I feel like I need to go for some more value and properly charge any draw, so I re-raise to $225. I'm targeting a hand just like Marty's, a 2-pair hand, or maybe a combo draw like Jack-Queen. The Maniac cannot fold quick enough. It's back on Marty, who immediately looks uncomfortable, which is awesome. The longer he thinks, the weaker I'm actually projecting his hand to be. Eventually, after a lot of squirming, Marty lets it go. Not necessarily the outcome I hoped for, but I'm happy to drag chips. So for the last 3 hours, this guy on my left has just been chirping. All night he's been talking about things he would do if a card came or if an opponent had acted a certain way. You can only take so much chirping.
Me and him, I would have snapped all that. I thought you were going to call with like a 6 or a 5.
You like to tell a lot of stories about it people didn't do things. And the cards you need to come. In the next hand, we see a raise from Aaron B and under the gun to $16. We see +1 make the call as well. It folds to me in the small blind, and I look down at ace-5 of diamonds. I'll be out of position this hand, and it's way too strong of a hand to fold, so instead I elect a 3-bet, and I make it $70. The big blind gets out of the way, and Aaron B pretty quickly calls. I don't love that. +1 folds, though, so we're heads up to a flop. The flop is Jack 4-4 with 2 diamonds. We flop the nut flush draw on a paired board. I start with a check, and Aaron actually checks behind. The turn is a Jack of clubs, so it double pairs the board. When Aaron checks the flop, I think his hand might actually be weak, and when the board just connects that much more on the turn, perhaps I can push him off of his hand. I still have a flush draw in case we're up against something like an ace or a small pocket pair, so I fire for $65. Aaron pretty quickly calls, so we're off to the river. The river is an 8 of hearts. I don't think it really changes too much of anything, and the action pretty quickly checks through. Aaron shows pocket 7s, and he's going to win this one.
Andy a little discouraged about that one.
In the next hand, it folds to me in the hijack, and I look down at 2 red 10s. I bump it up to $15. We see the cutoff, the button, and the big blind all call, so we're off to a flop 4 ways. The flop is ace-6 deuce with 2 hearts. Not my favorite flop. It checks to me. I decide to go ahead and put in a check, and it quickly checks through. The turn is a 5 of clubs, so it brings in a second flush draw. This board's just getting more and more connected. The big blind leads out on this card for $17. I personally think it's reasonable to call $17 to continue and see the river, so I make the call. The cutoff also thinks it's a good price, so he calls. It's on Aaron, and I expect him to just call and see the river, but Aaron does not call. Instead, he raises, but he only makes it $50. We see the big blind call pretty quickly, so it's on me, and Trey, one of the commentators, thinks I should recognize my hand is no good.
7-card flush, probably figuring out that his hand is no good now.
I'll show you, Trey. I call. The cutoff calls as well, so we're still 4 ways to the river.
Well,
That didn't go according to plan.
The river is a 4 of diamonds, so it puts a 4-liner out there, but both flush draws missed. The big blind checks, and I have showdown value, so I'm happy to just check, and I'm a little surprised to see it check all the way through. However, Aaron announces 2 pair, and he wins this one.
All right, so here's the stats as we do enter our final hour. That's the way things look. Aaron, though, having a great night for him. Definitely having the best night. And then Greg, who just joined the table a little bit ago.
Keeping the energy of that seat the same.
In the final hand of the night, which is the third to last hand of the stream, we see it fold to the cutoff, who bumps it up to $10. Over to me on the button, and I have 2 black kings. I briefly consider a call, as the last hour has been very tight, and I'm afraid if I raise, everybody's going to fold. But I also can't invite both blinds in for a cheap price, so I bump it up to $30. It folds back to the cutoff, who's been trying to get in the mix for the last hour or so, and he calls, so we're heads up to a flop. The cutoff does make note that it's probably the worst call, as we see a flop of King 9-3 Rainbow, so we have top set. He checks to me, and worried about absolutely no turn cards, I just check behind. The turn's a 9 of diamonds, so now we've bowed it up. I am hoping my opponent takes a stab, but he checks. I have to bet something, so I throw out a bet of $10. The cutoff seems to think it's a fair price, and he calls, so we'll see the river. The river is a queen of hearts, and my opponent checks for a third time, and desperate for some sort of payoff, I settle on a bet of $40. I think it might have been the perfect price because I get the cutoff to call. I show it, and obviously I win it here, so that will wrap things up for the stream. This was a different kind of night tonight. The game played way tighter and way smaller than usual, but it's still always a good time to go play on stream. Aaron B, let's take him home. All right, well, that will do it for the stream tonight. Aaron, I don't know about you, but it felt like kind of a weird night tonight. Not quite as action-packed as usual, or is that just me? Is that just me running a little bit card dead?
I think the players were different, and everybody's trying to feel each other out.
Fair enough. All right, so tonight in for 500, out for 433, so a real small loss. Aaron, how are your numbers?
In for 6, out for 21.
Pretty damn good night. If you guys enjoyed, like, subscribe. We'll see you next time. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more poker content. And you can follow me on Instagram at 7cardflushpoker.